History repeats itself, and we're in for world violence and intimate love life loneliness. Well, are we? Don't know? Let's have a look at it. We have Covid-19 and the lockdown. It happened. First time in a long time. Probably first time in your life, my life, and so on. But world violence actually has a link with this type of lockdown and self-isolation, as does the whole intimacy of love life and loneliness to come. You see, that's what has happened in the past. So what about the present? You wonder. I wonder too. We all wonder together. Like, in order to first look at what's happening now, we actually have to look at how this happened in the past and try and kind of make it comparable and see what's going on. From a study using social and behavioral science to support COVID-19 pandemic response by Bavel, Baker and Willer and so on. These guys, they hit it out of the ballpark. They knew exactly what to study at the time of early 2020. And they looked at the past. The past, as I say, is as good a barometer as can be for the future. And over a century ago, they looked at the Spanish flu. And here there was like a science paper back then when the actual science of the Spanish flu was being made. There was a science paper happening and occurring, a study being done. And this particular science paper that the aforementioned authors actually spoke about and referred to in their study, well, that science paper was published, and it noted that there were 3 major things that would actually prevent humans, us, me, you, human beings, from coming out of the pandemic successfully. And now when I say successfully, I'm not talking about cash, I'm not talking about money, I'm just talking about basic success. Firstly, they argued at the time that people don't really appreciate the risk that they in particular run. They themselves, interpersonally, they themselves as in you run a risk, I run a risk. Secondly, they reckoned that being cooped up and being like within your house or your apartment, your room or rooms for so long, and within such tight isolation is so unnatural for humans with regard to like protecting others. And finally, that as people do things unconsciously, that we as a people, as a human being, we are probably doing things that we don't really realize, and that in fact we are causing danger to lots of people. Now think about it, just even in the last few weeks or months, or your last few weeks and months of COVID-19, or even the lockdown itself, the initial lockdown. Think about how you felt and what you were doing. Really think about it. You have the answer. Only you can recall exactly the moments where maybe nobody was looking, but you know yourself, I touched that product in the shop. I shouldn't have touched it. I put it down on a shelf. After picking it up, I shouldn't have done that. Why did I do that? Only you will know that. I'm not looking 100% honesty from you, but I am going to give it. Hands up, I've done it. I picked up something, a product on the shelf, I read it, and I put it down, and then I went, oh, what am I doing? Like, why am I doing this? After putting on these gloves, after putting on this face mask, why am I doing this? So our unconscious behavior and the aforementioned 3 things, which was that human beings can't really adapt, or can they adapt even, to being cooped up and appreciating the risk that they actually run interpersonally themselves, that they have. And also this kind of, as I said, this self-awareness of the subconscious, unconscious things that actually occur. See, historically they reckon that we do know that infectious diseases have been responsible for the greatest amount of human death tolls. There was the bubonic plague, which killed approximately 25%. Imagine, 1/4, 1 in 4. Perhaps you could die out of your family and the other 3 are left. and then your best friend, he dies or she dies, and then their family are left. Or even if you think about one parent in each family, this is what happened to the bubonic plague of the European population, 25%. It's shocking when you think about it. But then again, we've gone through this whole lockdown of the pandemic that is COVID-19. And I spoke about world violence a few moments ago. And this doesn't necessarily actually have to be like a war where there's actually two fighting sides or two countries at war. But it can actually happen through a lot of different things that are happening within human behavior on the streets and just like different fractions of people. You see, emotions often drive risk perceptions, and this is sometimes more so than actual factual information. So with the lockdown, with COVID-19 and so on, there was news everywhere, as we know, and the news, like when you think about it, the news was even more powerful and more informative in many ways that was certainly happening during the bubonic plague or during the Spanish flu and so on, because now we have social media, now we have all these different things and ways of communication. So people, human behavior, it's their emotions that often drive this risk of the perceptions, rather more so than the actual factual information. In fact, the factual information can actually cause the emotions to be skewed. If you put fear on somebody, the factual information and just the absolute increased factual information, having something on every television channel, having something on every social media channel, is going to put a person into fear and then inflict this emotional response. And this is what we've seen happen. Think about your friends, I'm sure there's people you know that you have actually noticed, hey, they're like the most sensible person ever. And yet here they are doing their stupidest thing when it comes to this whole COVID-19. And you probably have noticed that. So it's all the human behavior that actually happens with regard to the interaction. This is what this study, this brilliant study told us. If we think about the fear, I'll give you an example. I remember myself during COVID-19 watching, well, obviously I was watching the road because I was driving along. But even though I was within my restricted area, going shopping and trying to help other people, I was listening to the radio. And on that radio, that particular day, was a chat show host who had already contracted COVID-19 and had overcome it successfully and was, feeling well and feeling good, which was good to hear. But they were interviewing this other person, and this other person was full of facts, full of science, but they were also actually a smoker. And they were thinking at the time, and there was this proposal put in as such from all of the medical professionals, the doctors of the country, where they might change the outdoor seating areas of smoking areas. So once there was this smoking area, and you could not have a cigarette lit, or even have a cigarette in your hand in the bar. This was what was happening in my country. This was the law, but smokers could go outside. And with that in mind, by going outside, they were fine. There was beer gardens, and there was lovely roofs and ceilings and so on. It was really comfortable. In fact, there was heaters, and it could just be as comfortable as actually being inside itself. But what they reckoned was what this radio presenter was projecting and putting the point out there to the person who, as said, knew an awful lot of science. She put it out that, well, what happens now because the goalpost is moved? You can't, as a smoker, go outside because, well, you can go outside, but you're going to have people around you that are non-smokers, and their rights are that they can have this space clear to have a drink or perhaps maybe have some food. And if you're a smoker and they're bothered by it, well, the law, perhaps, as per COVID-19 regulations, would have changed because of social distancing. So this person that would have been inside, if there's too many people inside, they have to go outside, and this law rules over the other law, such of the smokers outside. So the smokers don't really have that space themselves again. This expert in their own field was frightened, and they knew that the radio presenter wasn't a smoker, and that they had also been, contracted COVID-19. So they actually thought, well, hold on a second. your argument is skewed because you have had COVID-19, but in fact it wasn't anything to do with that. It was to do with the fact that they were a smoker. So it was actually hilarious, but it was very entertaining, but hilarious to listen to, because the person who was a smoker had actually been totally swayed, not by the argument of the presenter, but by their own particular fear. So this is just an example, but this is how it can actually spill out on our streets and spill into countries. This is where prejudice and discrimination can come to a fore. It can actually push people into fear. And the increase of prejudice has been known to occur. This is what happened in the past. This is how history can repeat itself. This is how groups of people can become more discriminatory and more prejudiced. And it's motivated simply by fear. Now, hey, say to your friends, even think to yourself, are you actually afraid, or were you afraid during COVID-19, during the lockdown? And the reality was you're probably more afraid than you had been a few months beforehand of certain things in life. But you have to admit that to yourself, of course. Now, maybe you did admit it to yourself. Maybe you had family and friends that were infected and so on. And I'm sorry if you did. But if you think of the fear level, this is the point I'm making, and collections of people, groups of people, cultures of people then in society can make this fear so big that the prejudice and discrimination comes along and bang, there you go. You've got this kind of warlike scenarios. And then, what about the intimacies? What about the future of intimacies? So with all that in mind, that fear that I've just spoken about actually leads you and me and others to start thinking about intimacy and the fear of getting close to somebody. The fear of, oh, they have it. Oh, they have the COVID-19. It's the thinking behind the fear, because again, we're being re-educated by what has happened with the information on the news and people that we know perhaps that has had the disease, or the numbers of people that have had the disease. Now, I know a second ago I said, hold on a second, the news and the information can be overseen by people's emotions. Correct. So when we become, or know we're attracted to somebody, we know we're becoming possibly or wanting to become intimate, naturally we have feelings, whether they're physical feelings or mental or emotional or all three. The point is, the feelings are there, but we know physically if we get close to people, that close, like we're closer if we hug somebody, if we kiss somebody, than we would be than standing with a friend 1 meter, 2 meters away. And naturally we want to get closer to a friend, closer than the 2 meters that was, well, told to us. So we are pushing the boundaries of social distancing by becoming intimate. This is what our natural urge would be. With that in mind, we know that, it becomes knowledgeable, and then we start looking at the facts and the figures. Then we start seeking out information. This is the natural thing. Then, bang, the fear starts again in a different cycle, in a different way. Why? Because we've all these facts and information, and if there's less facts and information about intimacy, because it's all brand new, this whole trying to get back to normal, the dating normal, the intimacy normal, that is tricky. So, World War, perhaps. Intimacy and loneliness, perhaps. You're different. You have a different life. We all have a different life. I hope we avoid all of this. I hope when I say world wars, that within communities we can all be peaceful and all be nice, and please, I know you will, be nice to one another. Let the whole interactions of intimacy occur as they may. Until next time, thanks for watching. Subscribe if you can. If you have already, thank you very much. Have a wonderful day.